We're faced with challenging times. The future is uncertain, and our response to it, the way we live our lives and our behaviours, will be important. Therefore, we need to think about how we're going to change to meet those challenges. The concept of Entelesyn is derived from two words: enteleke, which is a Greek term meaning an acorn that grows to an oak, i.e. it fulfills its full potential. And the other word, synergy, is that which comes together as a dynamic system. And so together we can grow to make the changes that are needed for the future. Entelesyn is really a networking opportunity to try and make those changes together, and so we can join in a bigger community, a global community, and really start to meet the challenges of the future and make the changes that are necessary. The video clip you're about to see is me talking about well-being, and it's quite well placed that I talk about well-being because if you think about it, most of our ideas of well-being are individually located or socially. But we can't have well-being without a planet. The planet is our life support system, and therefore we need to take care of it. If we take care of the planet, we're actually taking care of ourselves. Tonight's talk, as you'll see, is devoted, or dedicated if you wish, to a perspective of integral well-being, and hopefully you'll enjoy the talk. Thank you. I'm going to be talking about integral well-being tonight, so an integral approach to well-being. Now, when we talk about well-being, we've got to really think about what world are we living in and what does well-being mean to the future. And it's a little bit about what I'm going to touch on tonight. And this integral approach is going to try and touch some of those issues. Well, there's our gorgeous planet, and what a wonderful world. You know, there's another song, isn't it? Who sang that? But yeah, it's our life support system. Let's not forget that actually we talk about well-being and what supports us, what nourishes us. We've heard many speakers tonight saying that. But actually what we stand on is our life support system. The water we drink, the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, how we're nourished. These things are integral to our well-being. And without that, or if there's a decline in that, then really everyone suffers. And if we've got any heart for the well-being of the future and the planet, we've got to think about everybody's well-being. We are facing critical times. We've got the Copenhagen conference coming up next month. All the world leaders are gathering to try and make some connections to making an improved future. Here's the issue. We've got all the economics going on, the subprime thinking that's been going on to create that crazy situation. It's taken our minds off the key issue. We're talking about bankers' bonuses, and we're getting really negative about that. Hang on, the best thing that's ever going to happen to this planet could happen next month, and it's our world leaders getting together and coming up with some ideas about what will make a better future. And I think this is a critical time, but we can all play our part. My point tonight is, let's not leave it to the leaders. Let's take a lead in making a change. Let's have a look at what we mean. I think Cindy's just referred to those intrapersonal elements, those things that take us inside. They can be physical, they can be psychological, they can be emotional. What nourishes in those kind of arenas? That's a really important question. But similarly, on the outside, the interpersonal things that we do, socio, cultural and political, they all affect our well-being. You know, the political moves and shakers will affect us and what we do and what we're able to do. The cultural milieu that we live in, the social arena, the social rules and breaking those rules sometimes. And of course, the transpersonal. So we've got the intrapersonal, the interpersonal, and the transpersonal. The transpersonal is something that's bigger than any individual, but reflects all of us. It's the unity of our life. It can be deemed spiritual, and it can be deemed ecological. And in fact, if you look at many indigenous cultures, they don't separate those two things. What are we doing in our world? But what do we know about what's needed? What sense of being does that inspire? Are we growing in our doing, knowing and being? And what ways does that give us a sense of belonging? Now, from my perspective, that integral perspective, if we're not careful, all of those directions can take us away from the centrality of making the changes that we need to make individually and collectively. So I think there's something here where we need to sort of boundary. What is our sort of development? How are we containing our development? And how well-being and a sense of coherence cohere? how they come together. And I would suggest that that sense of self also needs a global perspective. You can't necessarily just locate the self as a doer, knower, beer, and a belonger. It needs to be contextualized in a wider situation. And I think if we can get some agreement in Copenhagen with our leaders, and yet if we all take a lead in making that commitment, so what we do, what we know, who we are in our beings, and what we belong to, if we make a commitment to making that better world, I think we'll all thrive in our own well-being whilst also making a better world. A friend of mine, a Maori, came over last year, and we had a wonderful conversation, but he referred to his land. He said, that's my mountain and my river. And of course, all over here we go, oh, it's very egotistical, you know, thinking that's your mountain and your river. Actually, he was correct, because he is part of the land. In their culture, they don't separate themselves from the earth. It's a spiritual and ecological perspective. So here's some questions that you might just want to reflect on as we go through them. But how do your daily activities, the things that you do, reflect the qualities of experience that you aspire to live? Do they match up with your deepest potential, your deepest aspirations? If so, do those qualities of experience, what's the intention within your actions? What's the form of expression? And what performance elements go with that expression? And what meaning comes from that? That's an interesting set of propositions if you think about that. Knowing. Think about the belief structures that you've grown up with. They could be socially determined, culturally determined. They might be things you aspire to from another culture. I've always loved indigenous cultures, and I tend to gravitate to those because they speak more of my language. But I don't dismiss my own culture because it's given me so much too. But how do my beliefs or our beliefs inform the qualities of our consciousness? How are we organising our conscious directions in life and those that we're capable of living? Perhaps we can think about, where do we locate our attention? Where does our attention go? How are we developing our awareness so that our attention is developing into something which is cultivating awareness and leading to that reflexivity, that truth-telling about what's right for us and right together collectively? I think that's an important question in terms of well-being and the future of the planet. Being itself, that sense of how is your potential served by those qualities of intelligence that we use. Many of you may have heard of Maslow here, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, one of the things that's not very well publicised in Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that intelligence is one of the things that gets people to self-actualise. I wrote a paper on that once, on occupational intelligence, and I've just done one on ecological intelligence, spiritual intelligence linked to ecological actualisation. It's something that I feel very passionate about, that our potential can be served in this greater good of dealing with the planetary issues that we're facing. So, in terms of reflexivity then, what stories do we tell ourselves? What truths can we digest? What truths do we need to tackle in terms of the potential that we can use to make this a better world, intrapersonally, interpersonally, and transpersonally? Here we go. Waking up to integral well-being. Well, well-being and desperation are incompatible states, okay? You can't feel well and freaked out at the same time. I think Finbar alluded to that very strongly. And I agree with that entirely. So, we need to do one thing, don't we? We need to think, okay, there is a challenge with the current climate change. We need to get on with it, but let's make it work for us. Let's feel well within it. You know, the British Arctic Survey is still finding life out in the Arctic. It's not desolate. But let's not get to the position where we get the lone piper piping out the lone penguin. We don't want that, do we? Actually, let's try to make not a lament, but something that's more hopeful. And, you know, maybe our communities, our world will grow and life will go on. And you know what? We can all participate in that. I trust me, we can all be a part of that story. We don't have to just leave it to Copenhagen. You know, get involved. Love what you're in and really use whatever you've got to make that a better world. I see another little child there. You know, what are we leaving for our legacy, for our children and future? Basically, that's my message. Integral well-being. Thank you very much.